I'm Angela Wolf, fashion designer and online instructor, and we are back sewing the trench coat. So there are different styles. This is definitely for a beginner sewer. The back is super easy, one piece. What about if you have a pattern that has a back vent? Or if this jacket was longer, you might need a little more room. This is how you walk. So this usually goes from the hip down, and I'm gonna show you how to sew this. So here I have the pattern piece. I've already pressed the interfacing, and you can see this is how the back vent looks on both pieces. So first, I just want to mention, depending on your fabric, I'm just using a fusible interfacing. There's many different brands, but it's very lightweight. If you have a thicker wool, or you're going for an outer trench coat, this is a little bit heavier, so you might want to resort to that. If for some reason your fabric, you can't use any interfacing, then you might want to go with cotton or something like that, but we're not going to get into that. We're making this easy. So the first thing I'm going to do is I will sew from here with a 2.5 or 3.0 stitch, depending on the thickness of your fabric. And then you're gonna back stitch about right here. And stitch with a basting stitch all the way to the hem. So I'm not gonna sew the whole thing for you. I'm gonna start about right here, just to give you an idea, because we're focusing down here. So off to the sewing machine. So I'm just making sure my pieces are lined up. You really don't need pins for this. Just make sure that everything matches. And I'm going to start stitching right here. My pattern includes a 1/2 inch seam allowance, so use whatever seam allowance is included with your pattern. And right now, I'm using a stitch length of 3.0, and I'm just stitching using my guide for my seam allowance. And when I get to this purple, I'm gonna stop and back stitch. That will secure my thread. And then I'm going to change the stitch length to 5.0, a basting stitch, basically. And if you need to follow to make sure that it's straight, you could draw yourself a line if you want to, but I'm just getting pretty good at this. So I'm just gonna stitch this straight all the way to the end. Another tip for you is you could use a piece of tape right here, because this is way further than your guide. Stitch all the way to the end. And you hope it's somewhat straight. No need to backstitch here. Now to the pressing, which is probably the most important part of this part. So from here up, I'm going to press the seam allowance open. This is a wool blend fabric. So I'm just gonna press up. Now remember, I didn't sew the whole thing, so give it a little steam, use your tailor's clapper to hold that in place. Now, your vent, usually it opens like this way, right here. So just think of your hand going around to the left. So if this was the front of my garment, or I should say the same thing, it would be opening like this. So I'm gonna take this entire piece and just fold it like this. I would say right or left, but it depends which way you're looking at it. I always just think of taking my right hand and wrapping it around. A little steam. Get out a couple of these wrinkles here. Again, using the tailor's clapper for a nice crisp crease. All right, so that looks pretty good. The next thing you want to do is mark your hem. I do this while this is closed right now. It just makes it easier. If you try to press that into a straight line, it gets a little bit, well, a lot of error can happen. So if your hem allowance is 2 inches, just go ahead and mark your 2 inches. This is just tailor's chalk. This just brushes off when you're finished. Brushes a little more than that, but it comes off. Just be a little careful if you're using the chalk that irons off. It depends on your fabric. If you have polyester in it, sometimes that marking doesn't come off, so just be careful of that. I'm folding this up right along my hem mark. Give it a little steam. And a little steam. And I actually do this back piece before I sew the garment together. It just makes it easier than having your entire jacket laying out. And I'm just gonna give it one more pressing up in here. Now, didn't I mention that from here, this marking up above, this is being pressed open, so let me show you what I do. I give it a little snip, just like this, right